stars be with you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Energetic Principles podcast. My name is Melissa LaFara. I'm an astrologer, tarot consultant, all around creative from sunny San Diego, California. And today we are doing a program on the upcoming Mars retrograde cycle through Leo and Cancer. And I'd love to welcome, I have a first time guest here, Yolanda McAdam. Thank you for joining me, Yolanda.
Thank you for having me, Mel. Thank you.
Yeah, so she reached out to me and she was like, "You know what? I love your podcast and I want to talk about Mars." And I was right at the time that I was like, "I want to do a Mars retrograde program." And so I was like, "What perfect timing to bring Yolanda on and connect with some Martian energy because Yolanda, you were saying you feel that Mars gets a bad rap or no rap at all. What's your take on Mars?"
Yeah, I think that Mars, I mean, and this is just generally speaking, right? It obviously doesn't apply to every astrologer out there or every astrology enthusiast. But I've just noticed that people tend to just gloss over him. They're kind of fearful, and rightly so. I think that Mars is dangerous and we shouldn't provoke him or or like, poke the beast too much. But I think that he's just glossed over or kind of rushed through in readings. You know what I mean? Like no one really lingers over the Mars placement in a chart. Like your Mars is there. Let's just move on quickly to something more interesting like Venus or Jupiter, right? But Mars is so, so important. We'll talk about it now in greater detail. But Mars is really the reason we get out of bed, as Erin Sullivan says, right? So very,
Yeah.
very,
We need Mars. We need Mars. And I can see why people gloss over it sometimes. We're like, well, let's not t talk about that tension or that what could go wrong because Mars gets the rap of being the destructive one, the one that's going to cause us
yeah,
pain or anger or all the things that most humans are not interested in. So I get that. But we're gonna give Mars its lip service today. And since Mars is in Leo, hopefully it'll be happy because it'll be getting some attention. But
yes.
before we get started here, Yolanda, share a little bit about yourself to the listeners.
Okay, so I'm an astrologer and a writer, and as you can hear, I'm originally from South Africa and I live in Canada, Vancouver, British Columbia. I certified in Western astrology back in the 1990s, so I've been doing this a really long time. When I moved to Canada, though, I discovered traditional astrology, and so my practice is a blend of traditional and modern astrology. And I really enjoy doing natal and vocational readings.
Hmm.
Those are my passions. I also relationship charts, synastry, because I'm always interested in relationships. So those really three are my kind of focus.
I love that. And you said you're a writer, so you have a
Yeah.
Substack, right?
Yeah, I write over on Substack. It's Yolanda Bella on Substack. And people can find I post every Sunday a week ahead, like horoscope guide insights for the week ahead. And I also write on midlife because that's my current journey. I'm on the midlife journey, so I write about menopause and midlife, but there's always astrology. There's always planets. There's always planets and moon phases and stars and land and spirit, that kind of thing. So yeah, people interested in that can find me on Substack. And I've got a website, which is Yolanda McAdam, and there's a hyphen between the Yolanda and the McAdam. That Pisces rising is coming through, Melissa.
Yes.
Yes,
We can
all these
find her in
little,
two places with two
yeah, we can find
names.
in two places. Yeah.
That's funny. All right. Well, definitely go check Yolanda out and her writing. And I think talking about the midlife journey is so important. I'm not in the beginning of it, but being 45, I'm definitely in it. And so I find it being more important to talk about and engage with because a lot of things, especially for women, are not really discussed. And so if we give that space to all us ladies that are going through the journey, I literally went to a Thanksgiving Friendsgiving a couple nights ago, and it's all women in their mid late 40s, and the whole conversation, and men were there too, but the whole
Yeah.
conversation was us just talking about perimenopause and
Ah,
the symptoms that, which was refreshing. I was like, yeah, get it out. That's happening to you too. Oh my goodness. I'm not
there's
alone.
just so much to talk about because it's a crazy, it's how can I put it? It's it's exciting, it's crazy, it's an initiation, really.
Mm,
That's exactly how I feel about it. So it's all those good things, the madness, the craziness, exciting. It's very spiritual. It feels like an initiation. And any woman going through this midlife journey knows what I'm saying when I say it is an initiation. You feel like you're being tested in every way. Um, and when I write about it, I'm actually there's a book coming out. I'm writing a book on midlife as a spiritual journey with my good friend Lisa Gruen, and it's coming out in 2026. So we're writing about the spiritual side of it because it's a very spiritual experience, and not enough women are actually speaking or focused on that because we're so focused, of course, on the physical symptoms. But there's other changes going on. There are other changes, deeper changes, more meaningful changes, besides the brain fog and the the the
and
night
all the
sweats.
hair coming
Yeah,
out of
yeah, the
my,
hair. Oh my
every time I take a
goodness,
shower,
losing the hair,
I'm like,
forgetting
how much
what you want,
hair?
forgetting what you want to say. Like, where's the words? Yeah, it's besides all that craziness, right? There's a spiritual thing happening,
Yeah.
right? Evolving. We are becoming something more, really.
Well, maybe I'll have to pick your brain about that at another time, since
We can
that is
talk
so.
about the cycles that are right. Yeah, the 40, there's a lot going on there. Saturn, Uranus cycles, Jupiter return, all of that going on in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
Chiron, the
Oh
Chiron
yeah.
at 50. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about, Melissa. You know where to find me.
We need to get a midlife panel going where we're all sharing our experiences. Oh my goodness. Well, let us not stray because Mars will get angry if we do not
Oh,
pay him the
we are lucky that
attention.
we're lucky we're speaking about him, like you say. Thanks,
He
you
was like,
pointed
"You're
it out.
talking about women's issues?" Excuse me.
Exactly, and he's in Leo. Like, hello.
You're like, hold on. He's like, I know that I know that I'm slow. I'm about to go backwards, but
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
here. So let us first, let me just throw some data at people with Mars retrograde. So basically, Mars is going to station retrograde at 6 degrees Leo. Here on December 6th coming up. And so this
Yeah.
podcast will air a couple days before that happens. And then it's going to station direct on February 23rd at 17 degrees of Cancer. And so as we go through this, and we'll look at charts a little bit later in the program, I want you to think about what houses, if you're a whole sign person, what houses is this retrograde going to be in for you? And when it stations, rather stationing retrograde or station direct, is it going to be on any natal planets, any natal angles? And really, will it traverse over placements in your chart too? Because that will, as we share information about this retrograde, if you have, personal contacts going on, take note because that is going to be where you're going to experience it the most. And so, actually, we've been in the if you're going to take in shadow phase, we've been in it since October 4th, when Mars reached that 17 degrees of Cancer. And we don't actually leave the retrograde degrees until May 1st, 2025. So it is a very long situation. What's the math on that? October to May.
Very.
What?
Oh,
That's our brain fog. Okay, what's that? 9 months?
don't
It's like
get
a
me too.
gestation cycle,
No,
almost.
it's just let's just say it's very long. Um, I would also add there, Mel, that yes, to look at the houses, the Leo and the Cancer houses, but also to consider the signs, the houses in which Mars ruled signs are in. So the
Yes.
Aries and the Scorpio for sure, because that is also where you're going to notice the retrograde slowing down. Yeah,
Yeah,
slowing
those.
down things for you in those houses too, for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense because that essentially Mars is governing those houses in your chart. And so, which, for me, it's the first and the sixth house. And I've been on such a good journey with my fitness journey and getting, showing up at the gym twice a week. And I'm like, please, Mars, do not let me down. I'm like, I was getting all into weight training and reading about muscle groups, Mars rules muscles. And
Yeah,
in the last couple of days, I've put the book down, and which is such a Gemini Mars thing. You get all into something, and then all of a sudden your attention shifts. And I was like, but I didn't want my attention to shift. And so I'm to your point, that first and sixth energy is now going and retrograding a
yeah,
little bit.
slowly but surely. But I do think that everyone's been feeling better while Mars has been in Leo this last little while. Certainly, all my clients have been more cheerful, more driven. I have too. I mean, I've been feeling energized. But not so much when he's in Cancer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think everyone's going to notice that shift for sure.
Yes. So we are definitely going to talk a little bit more about just
Yeah.
Mars we'll talk a little bit more about Mars as an archetype and then what that archetype looks like in Leo and Cancer. But just to jog a couple people's brains right now, give you a little more data, is that the last time we had a Mars retrograde in Leo, was all the way in Leo, was the end of 2009 and the beginning of 2010. So if you want to look back to that time in your life of what that flavor was. And then the last time we had a Mars retrograde in Cancer, it was in Cancer and Gemini, so it was a pairing there. That was in late 2007 to 2000, early 2008. So it's been quite some time since we've had Mars retrograding in these particular signs, which is actually quite interesting because of Mars's orbital cycle with the sun. The retrogrades
Ah,
actually happen more frequently in Cancer and Leo and Virgo, and less so in Sag and Aquarius. So even though it's been a while, if we look at the long term of our lives, if we look at our lifespans, we're going to have retrogrades more often in these areas of our chart, which is kind of interesting to think about too. Uh, but yeah, so if you want to take it back, that's the last time we've experienced that here. So, all right. So when I say Mars, Yolanda, what comes to mind? Tell me, who's this character?
yeah. Okay, so Mars is a fire planet, right? And he was named after the Roman god of war, Mars, who was also the god of agriculture. Not many people seem to remember that or know that, but it's important to know that because we tend to associate him more with Ares, which was the Greek god of war. And Ares was not quite the same kind of god as Mars, the Roman god. Like I say, he was not only a god of war, but he was also a god of agriculture. And he was really beloved by the Roman people. He was second only to Jupiter in popularity. People used to call him Father Mars because, I mean, agriculture, of course, was as important as also defending your territory, protecting your empire. So he was Father Mars. Very important that I think that's the story points to these other qualities of Mars, right? The father, the protective qualities, the defender, and not only this ruthless like warrior or this brute, which is more what Ares, the Greek god, was like, right? Um, so that's the archetype, the warrior, the defender, the protector. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's something to think about when we are assessing retrograde motion. So if we think about our warrior energy, our protector energy, how is that internalized and gone back over? We think about because that is essentially, I always like to think about Mars as I mean, less as its archetype itself, but more about its purpose is this mission-oriented energy. Like, because Mars is always on a mission. It's like, okay, I have my individual trajectory of my passions and what, as you said earlier in the podcast, what gets me up in the morning.
Yeah.
What it's kind of that, and this makes a lot of sense with Mars's cycle, synodic cycle, which we'll talk about here in a second, and its relationship with the sun, because essentially those two planets together is what gets us up in the morning. It's what gives us
Yeah.
life, gives us energy, gives us desire, drive, that passion. And it's so why would we want to ignore that, right?
Yeah. And I think we can't speak about Mars without speaking about the sun. Because the way I like speaking about Mars is think of Mars as the knight is in service to the king. And the king, of course, is the sun. And if you're into tarot cards and that, whenever I see a knight falling on the table, I know it's like a Mars thing. In other words, it's a call to action. So the sun and Mars are closely linked, they're interrelated. You can't look at one without looking at the other. So, for example, Mars right now in Leo, Sun in Sagittarius, they are on the same, you know what I mean, on the same level. They're communicating, they're understanding each other. The knight is running an errand for the sun right now, and he's got all the necessary tools. He's on the same page. He knows what to do. When he's not in the same, when the aspects are not harmonious or conducive, then there's a struggle. In other words, the knight Mars feels like he's not equipped. He hasn't been, you know what I mean? He doesn't have the necessary resources to run with whatever he's been asked to run with, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So you have to look at the two of them together,
Yeah.
especially
And
also in your birth chart, right? So where's your sun
mhm.
and where's your Mars? And does Mars actually have the necessary where he is in your chart is where he's energetically at home, where he feels comfortable with that energy. So then you look at your sun and then you consider whether that energy is going with what your sun is wanting of you, the essence of who you are. And can actually Mars get out there and deliver? Can he do who you are? Does that make sense? Can he do who you
Absolutely.
are with where your sun is? And some of
And
us struggle more, right? Because of the
mm,
squares and the oppositions.
yeah. And I think it has more, like what you're bringing up, I think is a very important part of going through this retrograde cycle. And every time we experience a Mars retrograde, because it is essentially, unlike, say, Mercury retrogrades or Venus retrogrades, where a lot of times the retrograde conjunction will be considered the beginning of the cycle. The Mars opposition, right, because it is a superior planet
Yeah.
to, Earth, it presents us with the opposition moment that is that contact with the sun, sort of that halfway point between when the cycle started, which was actually back in November of 2023 at 25 degrees Scorpio. So if we think about just this cycle alone, and maybe we'll touch on that more when we look at the aspects, we're at the halfway point of this 2+ year journey of whatever our meeting of the sun and the Mars, like you play, these two coming together and Mars riding off on its horse with the Scorpio directive of the sun, right?
Yeah.
We're at that halfway awareness point. And so there are things I feel like Mars retrograde, especially in the opposition, is an opportunity for a big reveal. Even if it's
Yeah.
frustrating or, like we have to bring something to consciousness so that we can turn the page and finish the rest of the cycle. So if we're not, to speak to your point, if we're not in conscious alignment with that, probably going to be a problem, right?
Yeah. And I mean, we're probably going to touch on it more just now, like you're saying, but the fact that also Mars, the synodic cycle, started in Scorpio. When Scorpio tends to deal with shadow material or unconscious or subconscious urges. So when this opposition arises, when we get to the opposition point, it's so are you still doing things the old way? Or have you actually changed things up? Because that's like you say, this need to review. Are you still like operating in a subconscious way? Are you still doing things the same old way, which is not actually what is required of you anymore? You need to change things up. Um, Become more, like you say, become aware of where you've been operating unconsciously, where you've just been doing things the same way for too long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's not going to get you where you want to go. And so this is
No.
where we're, And what's interesting as you were speaking, Yolanda, was it made me think about the strength of the synodic cycle being seated in Scorpio, which
Yeah.
Mars really likes Scorpio. We've got not only is it a sign of its domicile, but it's its nighttime domicile, and essentially Mars is a nighttime planet, and so it functions very well there. And it brings up this psychological narrative
Yeah.
that you were just speaking of too. And so the opposition is actually going to happen in Cancer, which is the sign of fall for Mars. So here we're seated in the strength, but there's something about the awareness component, which will happen around January 15th, that is going to precipitate some sort of, um, like possibly falling away. Maybe there's a depressive moment. Maybe there's just something that has to be removed in order for Mars to continue. It could be an
Mm.
emotional setup. I mean, Yolanda, tell me a little bit more because you have Mars in Cancer natally, right? So you're very
Yeah.
familiar with this placement. So
Very.
who is Mars in Cancer? To give us some details.
So Mars in Cancer is the image it comes to me, and it's very much how I am, is the mama bear, a fierce protector of the family and the home. Um, really, really mama bear energy, but also very comfortable with nesting and creating these safe spaces. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Mars is very comfortable with that, the emotional, like the need to nurture and to nourish, and is so good at being there for others. And you would think that because I'm so comfortable, and anyone with this Mars placement, Mars in Cancer, knows what I'm saying. You're so comfortable with the nesting and creating the safe space for others. But yet you struggle with having boundaries and maintaining boundaries. So it's a bit of an interesting, it actually speaks to that whole Mars Capricorn exalted, you know what I mean? Like the opposition there.
Yeah.
Because Mars Capricorn has no problem with boundaries setting and maintaining of boundaries. Like this far, no further, thank you. But Mars in Cancer, we're just so giving, so wanting to nourish and nurture others that we just take and take and take. And so we simmer with summer. It's like a cat, a kettle on the boil. Um, it's which is actually quite dangerous. I think they did a study once on psychopaths, and they found yeah, they found that Mars in Cancer was a common placement. It's this simmering, not attending to your anger. You know what I mean? Not
Yeah.
expressing anger when you should. Not saying, "Listen, I'm actually, you've hurt my feelings, or you've done such a thing." We don't address it immediately. We kind of we simmer, we let it just the boiling continue until, of course, it eventually erupts.
Mm.
Not good.
Not good.
Not good. And it also psychologically, it's this whole passive aggressive thing that
Yeah.
that starts it playing out there. It's indirect. There you go. That's, I think, the best way to describe Mars in Cancer. It's this indirect energy because we're trying to come across as, again, just being there for everyone else. Yeah, we're here for you. We can nourish, we can nurture, we can protect you, we can create this safe space. But we'll just bite back, with a passive aggressive, in that
Yeah.
passive aggressive manner. Yeah,
Maybe a
not
little guilt. Maybe a
yeah,
little,
guilt, you know what I
just a
mean?
little
Make you feel
guilt in
guilty,
there. Like,
manipulate you, like, but I've cooked you, I make all these wonderful meals, and, that kind of thing. And what have you done for me lately? And,
yeah.
um, yeah, it's very a victim, martyr kind of energy,
Hmm.
right? Play it pretty well, the martyr energy, for sure. I mean, I'd like to think I've grown, yeah, I've moved on from that, but I do think that if you have Mars in Cancer, you'll know what I'm saying, especially with that whole boundary setting. It's fascinating to me. I've taken note of that over the years. How we are so good at creating safe spaces, but yet we're not so good at creating that for ourselves, right? Creating these boundaries of
Well,
keeping, yeah.
yeah. And I think to add to your point, one of the not issues, but one of the reasons for that is because Mars in Cancer is essentially ruled by the moon. And we know the moon, it waxes, it wanes. So if we think about a hard boundary, that is definitely more Saturn territory. So we could see why
Yeah.
Mars in Capricorn is going to be able to be like, nope, this is where the line's drawn. I'm doing
Yeah,
this
no
and we're
more.
marching
Yeah.
forward. But Mars in Cancer is like, oh, maybe I'll draw the
Oh,
line this day, but then 2 days later, that line comes down, things get a little blurry. You're like, oh no, but give me a hug.
so
I don't
true.
know.
So, so true. And so, yes, and we are actually, our energy levels do with the moon. We
Yeah.
are definitely aware of where the moon is and what the energy, how, um, how much energy do we actually have because of where the moon is and what is the moon doing? I mean, I really, not only am I a sun Cancer, but I do feel the phases of the moon intensely. Is it waxing? Is it waning? Am I feeling drained? Am I feeling full? It really is. And I think it does also play to the fact of that Mars is in Cancer.
Yeah. So we're going to want
Yeah.
to remember that, right? When we look at Mars getting back into Cancer, we've already experienced it for the majority of, late September or mid late September. I think that's when Mars had originally moved in, and October, and then yeah, I think it was like early November. It's clouding my brain right now, but we've already
Yeah, it
tasted
was. It was
Mars
it,
in
yeah.
Cancer. Yeah.
It was it was an
Oh,
opposition,
yes.
wasn't it? The opposition in October, Mars
Yes, to Pluto. How can
opposite.
I forget that in early yeah, so quickly it has gone past my brain, because Mars is in Leo territory now, right? Like let's just
Oh,
yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Mars in Leo too. Kind of like what you were saying earlier, there's just a rush. We moved from lunar energy, which depending on the person, in the level of riding the wave and being able to interact with emotional content, the sun is a different situation where it's like, this is about me and the light is shining and who am I and how do I express myself? And it's a lot more fiery. And so who's this Mars and Leo character?
the way I experience Mars in Leo and what I've seen is Mars in Leo is very imaginative.
Hmm.
There's a lot of creativity to Mars in Leo, imaginative. In other words, so if you go back to thinking of Mars as this knight running, on an errand, on a mission, he gets very imaginative when he's in Leo. There's imaginative ways to slay your dragons, if that makes sense. It's not, it's just, there's just this, also this enthusiasm, this
Hmm.
positivity. Okay, I know that enthusiasm is more Sagittarian-like, but there's this optimism and this positive, like, yeah, but yes, I'm in tune. I'm aware of what I'm doing, of who I am and why I'm here, like my purpose. And so I can do anything and I will succeed. It's like this inner faith, right? This deep
Yeah.
faith that you cannot fail. I love that in Mars and Leo. It's very brave, very, well, not, I mean, brave, not in the sense of Aries where there's that boldness, courageous, uh, daring. Where with Leo, it's more of this heart-centered knowingness.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
So
just an overall confidence in the
yes,
self.
there you go, the confidence. Yes.
Yeah, because and confidence in like you were saying, sort of the hearth fires of the heart, right? Because that's the beauty of Leo and the sun. It's the fixity of what
Yeah.
keeps our light burning. And so having Mars in that sign means that this is a very close experience that we get to have with what sort of like what we were talking about before, what wakes us up, what keeps us consistently like, this is who I am, this is my ambition in the world, this is what I have to offer. And I want to shine brightly, and I'm fixated on that because that's a big thing right now. So we're in this fixated energy versus the cardinal energy, which can have pivot energy
Yes.
around it with Cancer. It can kind of go back and forth. And right now, Mars is just really concentrated. And we're just leaving the Sun Mars trine. And so when you were bringing in Sagittarius qualities, I was like, that actually makes sense because that And optimism and enthusiasm is very strong right before Mars goes retrograde. And while that's so important is because, and why that can be tricky too, is because Mars's cycle, right? You know, we talk about Mars has about a 2 year, 2 month cycle before it makes its conjunction with the sun. And of course, that about that 2.5 months is that retrograde period. So we get this kind of 2 years of Mars moving directly. And so that's why retrogrades can throw us back because we're like, hold on, I've been operating in forward motion for how long with my Mars, and you want to do what? Um, but what happens is that we experience a Sun-Mars trine about 15 to 20 days before Mars goes retrograde, and then we experience it the same where the trine happens about 15 to 20 days after it stations direct. So the trick of that is actually we get this inflation right before we go to retrograde, right? We've got the
I love
sun,
it.
Mars,
Yeah.
we're riding high,
Yeah.
but we gotta just be aware in this moment that there is that turnaround. Any thoughts on that, sort of like how that trine plays into the
Yeah.
preparation?
It's it's almost like we blessed with that enthusiasm, that optimism that we can conquer. I mean, just think in terms of the hero's journey. So it's that whole hero, out we go. We approach the dragon, and you have to, I mean, you have to be fired up. I mean, imagine,
Right.
approaching a dragon, you have to be fired up. You have to believe in yourself, whatever that dragon is for you. And so that's where we are right now. We are still fired up. We're approaching the dragon. We believe we have everything we need to slay this proverbial dragon. And then retrograde hits to bring us back to reality. It's like that review that you're speaking about. Like, okay, whoa, wait a minute. This dragon is bigger or bigger than you thought, or it's taken up bigger space, or whatever the case may be, or perhaps it's like a taking stock. What else do we need to find or to what else do we need to retrieve um, in order to defeat this or move this obstacle or move forward, whatever. I think it's the retrograde is a period of reflection in terms of slow down, rest up, because something bigger, like you're saying, that trying after the retrograde once again puts you in the position where you're now ready to,
Yeah.
that fatal blow, cuts off the head of the dragon or whatever the case may be. But you need to first reflect, review, examine the situation carefully. And I mean, I'm already seeing that in my own life right now. I know exactly where I'm at with my projects that were commenced, at the beginning of the Synodic cycle in November 2023. And so now I'm very enthusiastic because I'm writing this book, like I said to you. But I'm also aware that, whoa, wait a minute. I have to take stock at this particular point in this journey. Does that make sense? So that's
Absolutely.
exactly where I'm at. And I think most of us are going to find ourselves in that situation. If they're not there yet, certainly when Mars goes retrograde, you're suddenly going to realize, whoa, slow down to just gather more information. It's interesting that Mercury is retrograde too, right? Do you see how it's all playing?
Yes.
It's all playing
Hmm.
into this slow down because you actually do not have all the necessary information or knowledge required to move forward on whatever. It's so they're all playing into one another at this time.
Yeah. And it's interesting to think about too, just because I'm going to actually go ahead and share the chart of
Yeah.
so people who are watching on YouTube can see. And right now I have the chart up. Let me get my little annotation tool. And so right now we see we're actually at the Mars Sun trine, which we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And sort of what Yolanda was saying, it made me think about, I mean, enthusiasm and being fired up is all well and good.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of logistics. There's a lot. We can't work
Yeah.
on just vision alone, when we want to slay that dragon, right? And there's something to be said because, right, we're in Sag season. So we're in this visionary land. We're in this shifting. We're adapting to like what our inspiration is telling us, where, the what the future could possibly look like. We're all hopped up on this Mars and Leo juice. But as we're going to go forward here, we're going to see that opposition that we were talking about earlier that can kind of maybe stop us in our tracks or give us that moment of conscious awareness that is so crucial to why we're going back in the first place is going to be happening in Capricorn and Cancer, which, so to think about sort of this journey with Mars, with it, going from Sagittarius, or the sun being in Sagittarius and then Capricorn and then Aquarius. Like we start off and we're in Jupiter land and we're like, oh yeah, possibilities, they're endless. And then we're going to be in Saturn territory, which is going to be, I think, very helpful to what you were talking about earlier and the idea of the boundary. So,
Because
yeah,
remember too, Sagittarius, as you say, as you know, is ruled by Jupiter. So we're all thinking big right now, really thinking big.
yeah,
We're big thinkers right now, visionaries. Everything is possible. And Mars retrograde's coming around to say, yeah, you don't have the necessary weapons or tools for this particular, um, slaying of a
yeah.
dragon.
And maybe not right now in this moment. Maybe
Not
that's
right now.
yeah, maybe this is when we go to the forge and we're like, okay,
Yeah,
so
let's
I'm
go
going to
make
need
some.
this particular tool and I'm going to need this particular tool. And now that I've had some time to think about it, maybe some things will not quite work out because I think it's a beautiful thing to dream and imagine and get enticed by the vision. Uh, so enjoy that, but in perfect, Sagittarius style, we need that temperance and that moderation
Yeah.
because not to kill the dream, not to kill the vision, but because if we really want to realize something, we're going to be running on fumes if it's just enthusiasm alone. Like that's not going to carry us all the way to the finish line or the victory, right? Because that's a big thing with Mars and Leo. Even though we're going to go back into Cancer, Mars and Leo wants a victory. It's like it is. I want to be victorious for myself, for my pride, what it is I want to do and create. And in order for that victory to take place, we have to go through what may be, could potentially be a frustrating journey for a lot of folks, especially Mars ruled folks like myself. If you got a Scorpio rising, you got an Aries rising, we are not used to retrogrades. So
No.
I feel like because every time Mars retrogrades, I'm it's almost like the wind gets knocked out of my sails. I'm like physically, I feel like, ooh, what is going on? Like I can barely get up and feel that motivation that I just naturally have. So there's something to be said about that. So if you're feeling a little weird, Aries Scorpio folks, that's why. So
I
I do
I'm
have the
glad you
chart
said
set
that.
up for just to state
Yeah.
I do have the chart set up for the Mars retrograde on December 6th. So if you're wondering what we're looking at, but go ahead, Yolanda.
I'm glad you just said what you said there because I've always felt that one way to describe the Mars retrograde feeling or vibe is Mars in Scorpio. Mars in Scorpio vibe is very retrograde-y. Um, in that it's because you know Mars and Scorpio, right? When it hits you, of course, your wind is like blown out of your cells. But what it's like this need to go under, to go
Mm,
deeper. And whenever we have to go deeper, it's almost the quality becomes, I don't want to say depressive, but you know what I mean? Like you need to,
yeah.
it's yeah, it's not joyous, it's not happy making like what we're experiencing right now. It's more of like, okay, we have to really go deep. Let's see what tools are, what do we have, what resources do we have deep down that we haven't used yet? Because Mars is interested always in taking us out of victimhood to victory. So victim to victor, always. That's always what he's wanting for us. He's not wanting us to be victims. So if along the way we have to have these moments of melancholy or so-called, depression, sadness, um, and I don't want to like gloss over it because depression is a very real thing, but you know what I mean? Like this deep melancholy, this deep reflection, that's necessary. And I think Mars makes it the reason you need to go deep is because there's something that you are not aware of, or you haven't brought up to consciousness, some talent, some gift. Because remember, Pluto as well rules Scorpio, for example, and he is the god of wealth. So there's these nuggets, this gold, this inner gold that has to be brought out. And it's hard. It's hard because we've either repressed it or ignored it. And to bring it out and to start using it, especially if you've been playing the game of where you've been trying to impress others, do whatever other people are expecting of you, it's hard to then start bringing out these gifts that have been hidden. Because again, Mars is very much about individuation, becoming yourself. As Jung said, Mars is the planet of individuation. So it's like this you need this courage, this boldness to bring out things that you've never used before, tools or gifts that you've never dared to bring to the light before in order to move forward. And I think that the fact that he's retrograding as well, going into he'll start in Leo, but then going into Cancer, it's literally translates to what are you bringing home, at home, right? What comes home to you? And you'll probably find that it's something to do from your past, because the Cancer is also relating to memory and your past. So something from your past that has been repressed or hidden has to come to light, has to be revealed and shown to the world after this retrograde period, which ends in February, and like you say, even more further, maybe even after the shadow period of it ends in May, right?
Yeah.
It gives you that extra time to pluck up the courage, you know what I mean? Or possibly the necessary skill to then reveal something more.
I like that.
I wish I could give you an example of what I'm trying to say, but
No, I feel what you're trying to
yeah,
say.
you see what I'm saying? It's like something comes home at last. That's the kind of vibe I'm
I can
getting.
already see what's going
Come
on in
home
my
at
own
last.
life as you're talking about that. I'm like, yeah, it actually stations direct on my son. So I'm
There
like,
you go.
I'm like, yeah, I am come home. I literally
Yes,
have
something comes
dreams.
home at
My
last.
my reoccurring dream is trying to get home. That is literally my reoccurring dream. And I'm really connecting with what you're talking about, because I think when we bring up the idea of courage and confidence, like true courage, you have to dig deep for. It's not a
Yeah,
surface, it's not a
no.
surface passing by where the sun just happens to ramp you up at a certain time and you're like, because that can come and go. But when we talk about that true sense of courage to carry on the mission that might want to be injected in your life, in that sense of because I really understand sort of that past, and why the past is so important too. As we go, Mercury retrograde is part of the station of Mars retrograde, and then immediately Mars goes direct and Venus goes retrograde. So there's a lot of this you know like remembrance, I feel like, of
Yes,
maybe who we are and the
yes.
talents and what our passion is. How many times do we uh abandon a passion that is actually so important to our sense of self, our well-being, our liveliness in life? And because, like you were saying, the outer world maybe expects something of us, or other people now see us with this, or we're committed, right? We go back to the boundary. We're committed to this. So maybe we have made a boundary and we're like, oh my God, but that boundary doesn't support the actual actions I want to take in my life. And so how do I fall? How do I fall and release what it is that I've set up? So, I mean, I love what you're saying. That's immediately what comes up for me.
It's you said it there as well, Melissa. It's basically you have to find an integral, something that is integral to your ultimate success moving forward. And it's some passion that is, like you're saying, has to come home. It's coming from something that was either repressed or from your past. And it's part of your essence. So if you want to succeed at whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, that integral truth, that passion has to come out. And it's, by the way, again, also playing out in the Mercury retrograde. He is in the underworld right now, Mercury, right? He's traveling in the underworld.
Yes.
So there's all this shadow stuff going on. Like, what's Mercury right down? Is down there, Sagittarius retrograde, and definitely asking you to re-examine beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely saying, examine what you believe about, well, any philosophical, religious, that kind of stuff, but also cultural, right? What do you believe
Mm.
about cultural stuff? And now Mars is also playing into that. I mean, look at them there, 13 degrees and 15 degrees Sagittarius, Mercury and Sun there. Yeah.
Yeah, and that opposition with Jupiter, if we aren't like looking
Yeah.
at,
Can you see that?
yeah,
So
what
yes.
is it that we think? What is that we
What is it
believe? And
that
then
you,
how does
what,
that play into our motivations or what we think that those
well, there,
possibilities and
what do
potentials?
you think you believe?
Mm,
Is it actually your thought? Chances are it's not.
yeah. Feels like there's a lot of feels like what I'm getting from what we're saying is there's a lot of conditioning to break through.
There you go.
And
There you go.
and
So,
why frustration, right? We think about frustration with Mars retrograde. We also think about, we're very active with Mars direct, but maybe we're more reactive and things come up and bubble up to the surface. And so if we get that sort of anger or that our drive just deflates. Like I think it's such important information if we're doing something and all of a sudden we have no energy for it, like pay attention to what that looks like because it's your physical body and your like life force that is communicating to you. And so there could be inner conflict. There could be things that meet you on the outside that are going to frustrate that energy or to boil it to a point to where it gets in your face and challenges some of the things that we're talking about and what it is that you think you believe and uh, rewriting the story
yeah.
essentially.
And considering what's going on in the world right now and what recently happened, right? Do you see how this is all playing out? With people who've been despairing and losing hope with things that have happened, recently. Um, the planets are saying no. Revisit your thinking around this. There's always possibility. There's always a way through, but it's not going to be easy. You know, and they make that
Nothing
very
ever good
clear.
is.
It's not going to be easy, but boy, do not give up because what's needed is a new way of thinking, a new way of moving and doing. Because again, we're speaking about Mars who does things. He acts on things. So Mars is saying in this movement forward, because as I said before we started the podcast, remember what's happening next year is big stuff. Saturn moving into Aries, Neptune moving into Aries. Guess who rules Aries? Mars. So all of this is about starting or revisiting the way you do things, the way you move through the world, and not to be in despair, not to just give up. You're not going to be a victim. You have to be a victor. How do you act as a victor in this new world? Because it's a new world, right? We're on the
Yeah.
threshold. Yeah.
I think what you're saying is a very important point to bring up and sit with as we go through the rest of this podcast is remembering the Aries activations that are coming, right? With Saturn and
Aries, yeah.
Neptune and the conjunction that's happening there. And we are going to taste all that. We're going to taste all that before Mars even gets out of Leo, right? Because that is we're going to experience the first ingresses there. So this preparatory period is crucial to really that divine mission because it's so centered in the beginning of the zodiac. It's like sort of has Big Bang force behind it. So it's like if you really want to uh shift your life and your direction and your confidence and live your I'm gonna live your purpose. It sounds so
No,
motivational
it is.
speaker.
It is.
Live your purpose, people. Um,
It's literally the stars are screaming, the planets are screaming right now. Who are you? Because it's going to become the question next year that you have to have an answer to. Not
yeah.
who society says you are, not who your parents think you are, not who your boyfriend says you are. It's who are you and know who you are and be unshakable and you know what I mean? Like really, really know who you are and stand for it. Like stand for something.
Mm.
That's what Mars is preparing us for.
Oh my goodness. When you said that, because the whole term stand for something, if you don't stand for
Stand
something,
for
you'll
something.
fall for anything.
There you go.
If that, oh
That's
my God, that's
exactly
so
what's
Leo
coming.
Cancer.
Stand for
Mars.
something or just, or well,
Yeah.
if you don't stand for something, you're going to be literally eaten up next year.
Yes, we don't
I
we don't
mean,
want
yeah,
that.
well, we can talk about it some other
Yeah.
time, but you're literally not going to make it. Uh,
So I so I think this actually is a perfect time to segue into the next essential aspect that happens with as Mars retrogrades
yeah.
is at the beginning of actually I probably could have just gone straight there, but we have this Mars Pluto opposition. We've already
Yes.
experienced one that
Oh
was in the
gosh.
first I know in that first week of November, right? That was
Yeah.
around when that was. And so the second one will actually be the beginning of the year, right? I think it's like January
January 3rd, I think.
2nd or
Second, third,
3rd,
yeah.
depending where you are.
Yeah.
I could have just let me just make it exact. My Virgo planets are like, just do the calculation. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, depending on where you are in the world, this is squeaking in January 2nd or squeaking out January 3rd. But I think that, oh, really just the beginning of the year, because if you look at the first day, January 1st, the moon basically highlights this opposition. So
Yeah.
first thing we get into 2025 and we're like, holy crap, Mars and Pluto are back, but in different signs. And so, I mean, there's a lot that goes with this aspect, right?
Oh, so much. Yeah.
What do you what do you kind
Ah,
of decipher about? Yeah, in so many quick words.
I mean, it's really there we're seeing what does the self want versus what the collective wants, right? Like what does your heart want and what does the collective say you should want? Um, and the power struggle involved in that, right? So you versus um, the collective pool or directive, right? Um, to me, though, oppositions always bring a relationship into focus,
Yes.
like you and someone else, always. I mean, that's what I experienced as well in October now, and many of my clients. It's you and someone else in conflict, or like not on the same page, and it's like this power struggle, and usually reactionary. So you tend to react without thought, you just, and then probably end up having to apologize afterwards. It's a very volatile opposition. Well, because of these two. Normally, I wouldn't
Yeah.
say oppositions are too bad, but these two are so intense that it does end up with, you know, breakups, removals, like cutting people off or whatever and it's just almost impulsive and it and I don't I think it's wonderful that the cosmos is doing this because we've had more than one opposition, right? This Mars
Yeah.
it's almost trying to like teach us not to act quick, not to be reactive, to really consider if we're coming from a you know unconscious place, like are we just acting without thought. Like, have we really considered this? And so once again, we're given an opportunity, yeah, on the 3rd of January to consider, um, do we really want to cut this person out of our lives? And if we do so, are we prepared to make it permanent, for example, right?
Yeah. There can be just a lot of internal conflict around that um
Yeah.
narrative to where maybe the cut doesn't happen, but we're
No.
we're concentrated on it. And it could happen rashly, and then we have to sort that out as time goes on. I mean, everybody's story is going to be different. But I feel like it's going to be an internalized conflict around what
Yeah.
that looks like, and it can be very volcanic, right? Because Mars is very instinctual energy, Pluto is very instinctual energy, so there's just like these like biological drives that are just like churning, and it can feel probably pretty uncomfortable, but it can feel empowering too. That's the beauty of Mars Pluto together, especially in the opposition. And so whatever we're faced against, whether it's another person, whether it's more of society as a whole, or our shadow within a relationship or within our relationship to society, we're confronted with that material. And one of the first things that came to mind as I was looking at this too was thinking, Leo and Aquarius both it's the idea of like Leo is the performer. Leo has the thing that it wants to give to
Mm.
the collective. And so we can have all these creative gifts. We can have this agenda of who we are, and what we're here to express. But where does that fit in the wider world of things? Who's on board with that? Who can help that?
Yeah.
Mission, right? Who's not helping that situation for whatever reason. And so there could be um, some content that comes up around that too, as we're so pumped up of like, okay, this is who I am now, but what does that look like in the world? And what fears are behind that? Once again, shadow content. We're about to go back into a water sign. We got things to work out
Oh
here.
yeah, for sure, definitely. And also because that the moon there is conjunct Pluto. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not a close conjunction, but still conjunct. I would say that it's this opposition coming up is physically harmful too. That we
Mm.
can it, you know what I mean? Like it can actually harm the body if we do not deal with whatever comes up. So it could be stressful, right? It could be
Y-
stress. It could
yes, I
be,
think that's a good
yeah.
word.
There we go.
Yeah.
So definitely because the moon was there, for sure it's going to impact the body.
Yeah. So, and so then maybe that is just a w for everybody who's out there celebrating on the New Year's Eve. Just be careful, be safe, get a lift, or
Don't drink too
walk,
much
or don't.
or
Yeah,
eat too much. Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, because it's just there is that accidental energy. Because that's the thing too
Yeah.
with Mars retrogrades. A lot of times people might have accidents during them or before them because they're meant to be taken out in some way so that which can be very frustrating. But for a lot of people, especially people who are just go, 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 the only way to get there is to, sort of the universe takes you out for a second, whether an injury, to be like, okay, well, now that I have all this time to integrate and think and redivert my energies, what does that look like? So that is a big, so basically, let's carry on and we're going to get into Cancer around January 6th. January 6th, I think, is when we come back. So now we're in Cancer territory and we'll be here for quite some time
Yeah.
again. And one of the things I really like about the moon moving back into, so the moon, Mars moving back into Cancer is yes, we're headed to that opposition, right? We're only 11 days out. Uh, but let me just continue going forward here. One of the things we have going on is this flow to the Pisces situation. So we have this Mars, the tail end of Cancer, and there will be a trine to Neptune, and then eventually a trine to Saturn here. We're going to get ahead of ourselves. And there's going to be a sextile to Uranus too. So we're bringing in these outer planet shifters, essentially. Mars is really configured to the outer planets, this whole retrograde, uh, which I find interesting. But any thoughts on sort of the support from Neptune, Uranus, eventually Saturn?
Well, to me, it's to me there's a lot of beauty and a lot of healing in a lot of light and healing in that Neptune trine to, then Mars Neptune trine there. It's almost like divine guidance. Like you are, you know, whatever you're going through, know that it is that you're being divinely guided, that you are not alone, you know, not alone at this time. And also, it's also it's
Yeah.
inspirational. It's this inspirational energy. Don't give up. Keep your dreams alive. Um, and but then also with the Uranus factoring in their sextile, Uranus sextile Mars there, I would say it's again going back to that resources that you actually have what you need. The
Mm.
gifts are there. The gifts are there. Taurus is very much about the land, the gifts, what you have. Um, and so you have what you need to move forward to accomplish your dreams. You mustn't give up. That's generally the what I'm getting from
Yeah.
this.
I
Because
like that.
we've all gone through, it hasn't been easy, right? I don't know anyone who can say they've had a fabulous time this year.
I
Um,
know.
it's been difficult for everyone. And so those outer planets, those big gods, those old gods, right? Those old gods are saying, yeah, we're designing something big. There's big changes coming, but you are supported. You're not alone. You can do this.
Mm.
You have it.
Yeah, it makes me think of like just putting Mars and Neptune together, because it does have that inspirational quality, but it also has that potential o opening to an easy surrender. You know,
Yes. Surrender to your God or whatever, you know what I mean? Surrender. You don't have to take it all yourself. You don't have to, the load's not all yours. It's remember that, I mean, from a modern astrology point of view, Neptune is the higher octave of Venus. It's that higher love, that divine love. It's
yeah.
yeah,
So
give it
tap
to
back
us.
into that, especially after a
Yeah.
heavy dose of Pluto. We might need to work off some of that stress by just surrendering and envisioning and connecting with our spiritual energy, in really allowing ourselves a break. Like, I think there's something around what's gestating, especially in early mid-January, that we might need proper rest, because rest is an important part. Because to go back to what we were talking about earlier and sort of the psychological component to this Mars retrograde, and especially the water component, is that we need that time to rest and to meditate and to get into the deeper material that is a very personal journey that's not going to happen when we're flying at, 90 miles an hour down a road. And so if we're able to take this time and lean into that, especially with that Uranus sextile happening, which I believe, let me go ahead and move forward the chart here. I want to take us to that full moon on January 13th. Yeah, because that full moon is exactly configured to Uranus.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
here's our Uranus moment, right? We have our Neptune energy, Pluto to Neptune, but we have this opportunity for that insight or that liberation or that connection with resource, right? That you were explaining, especially when we think about the sun trining Uranus at the same time. And this is just 2 days before we get the opposition, right? So this full moon is really going to bring us that opposition effect before the opposition gets here.
Mm.
So, any thoughts on this
I
space here?
I think that full moon brings home uh for many the the reward for greater daring. So because you were innovative or because you were um, prepared to do something out of the ordinary, that Uranus there, that something
Mhm.
out of the ordinary because you were prepared to risk, there is this reward. And so for some, a reward arrives that day, right? Um, but also how I mean, just look, it's so beautiful.
I know it is.
The earth, it's almost, it feels to me like something again something is embodied. That Cancer,
Hmm.
Sun in Capricorn, that because you are willing to bravely do something out of the ordinary for yourself, some out of the ordinary expression of who you are, of your true essence, has now resulted in some reward. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, I
because
mean,
you've been hiding so long, but because now you've dared to do this, you dared you've risked, you took a risk. Look, here's the reward.
yeah, because it's it's shown, it's celebrated. It's really the concept you were talking about earlier about this idea of returning home, or seeing even or really feeling what home really looks like in that regard. Because I mean, we are halfway through the cycle here, and the moon and the Mars together is can be a volatile
Yeah.
combination, but Mars, essentially, the moon is in its own sign. Mars has to look to the moon. So even though it can have some feathers ruffled to some extent, there
For sure.
is the capacity emotionally to handle whatever comes up and to integrate it or nurture it, or wonderful word for Cancer is self-care. How do we
Yeah.
care for the self within this story and liberate it too? Neptune's
Yes.
getting closer to the North Node, which is now in Pisces. Like there's a lot of shifts that happen right in this moment.
A lot. This is going to be a powerful moon. I might also add there that because the moon is conjunct Mars there, for sure it's going to be very draining. I mean, not only is Mars retrograde there, but it's like, yeah, low energy, low energy.
And so maybe as we move forward here, to get to our Sun Mars opposition that just happens 2 days later, we could be aware of that drain,
Yeah.
right? That's the thing is it's like this is, and maybe we're aware of the drain because we're not like overly drained, but we're drained in a specific area that maybe we no longer care about. And that's the thing. And to go back to sort of what you were talking about earlier with the idea of the boundary, or we're so aware of what we care about that we need to release the boundary. Either way, we're either setting one or we're, destroying one. Um, I think this is going to be a very informative moment, especially with the moon in Leo, right? Because the moon's tapping into all the Leo energy that Mars is about to get back to. Yeah, that's kind of what's coming up for me looking at that.
Oh, I love that. I love it. I think you said something there that's very powerful, and I think that's going to manifest for sure for many, is if you have not realized what or whom has to be removed or cut from your life, then around this opposition is when it is made abundantly clear that you have to do something, right?
Feels very intuitive, right? With
Yeah,
that Cancer energy coming through. It's
very,
like
very
you
intuitive.
can't, yeah, you
Yeah.
can't like
Like,
deny it.
the universe has sent you, look, I've zapped your energy because you refuse to let this go. Now, what else do you want me to do? Here's the opposition to say, look, you have to do it. Otherwise, you can't move forward.
You got to do it.
You got to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually feel like I kind of glazed over in maybe I didn't. Sorry, I'm like looking at the chart here with my notes. Because I know that there is, because we were talking about more relationally related stuff in that moment. Let me just check on Venus here. Let's check on Venus. Mars's counterpart, right? Those
Yeah,
two tend to go hand in hand.
they do.
Um, and yeah, so right after, so I'm just going to throw this in. We don't have to talk about it too much, but just awareness, especially when it comes to sort of the boundaries that we're talking about, or
Yeah.
identifying, what we're in union with and what we're breaking away from, whether that's people or concepts, ideas, collective, whatever. December 12th is when Venus makes an opposition to Mars retrograde. So
Yeah.
just a couple days afterwards. And just out of curiosity, yeah, she makes another one in March, but we don't need to quite go there yet. I think what I wanted to do was bring in the trine that happens January 25th. So about 10 days after we have the Sun Mars opposition. So we have this Venus Mars story, right? We get an
Yeah.
opposition first thing into the retrograde, but then we get this watery trine coming together with Venus exalted in Pisces. I mean, sandwiched between Saturn and Neptune, but yeah.
Oh, it's
So any
beautiful.
thoughts on that kind of storyline?
Well, it's beautiful if you've done the work, if you've done all the work that we just described now. If either you've again, you're going to have to look at the houses and your planets and what they're associated with for the a more concise picture of what we're trying to talk about here. But if
Yes.
you've done the work, the psychological work or the actual physical work of removing yourself from a situation, a group, or a person, or whatever. Um, or the psychological work of removing beliefs and dumping stale beliefs, unhelpful beliefs. What's happening here is again, so Venus in a trine harmonious aspect here, in accord with Mars, is uh, so you'll probably find that you'll be in a better relationship after this, or your relationship with others has been improved because of what you've done, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that you are able to, oh yeah, I love that also with Uranus there, that you are able to communicate openly and like be who you are with this person. You
Mm.
can actually be who you are. That taking that risk, exposing yourself, or taking on new habits, new ways of moving through the world has paid off. It depends again
Yeah.
where this falls in your chart. It could be a new relationship, perfect soulmate relationship, for example, or it could be people around you now respecting you or really, wow, okay, we didn't know this. But yeah, we love you for it kind of thing. You know,
Mm.
that kind
And
depends.
I think when you're talking about like soulmate relationship, I think an important thing to bring up here is with soulmates is that when uh to some extent, I mean, soulmates can come and go in life. We have our spiritual purposes with others, but people that are truly in line to be with one another, it is never a straight road. Like you have to
No,
go through issues, and situations. You have to find yourself to come back and find each other, kind of thing. And so just thinking about that opposition that happens in Aquarius and Leo, which can be very distancing, and I'm working on my thing, and like it's not this watery trine where we're merging, and I feel, I feel this new energy around this, and my I'm excited about it with the Uranian component, or I'm thinking about it differently, or engaging with it differently, or ready to change because maybe Venus in Pisces is has put a compassionate edge and is like in this like
yes,
universal love space, and Mars is like, I really care about this, or I really care about you, and how do we do things differently, and how do we flow together? And so yeah, I feel like this could be a lovely moment for that,
I
Venus
love it.
Mars story.
It does. It looks very. I mean, it feels to me very spiritual, very
Yeah.
loving. That particular day, for sure. January 25th. Isn't it the day that the planets all line up in the sky?
Um,
If you're actually outside
oh,
that day, yeah, they all line up that day. If you
on
guys,
January 25th?
yeah, I
Okay.
think that's the day. Yeah.
Well, we're adding even more specialness
So yeah, I do
to
think
that day.
that's a very special day. It's going to. There's a very loving vibe that day. And yeah, all that water energy, loving, um, spiritual for sure.
So now we're into February, and we're getting closer to the station. And one more aspect I want to give quick lip service to is, oh, look at this Venus. Yeah, this is an interesting day actually because we have two things going on February 2nd. Groundhog's Day, if anybody
Yeah.
celebrates. Also, what is that? That is oh my gosh. My witchy brain is not showing up for me right now. What is the turn of the season? February 2nd. There's a is that May? No, that's not Maybone. What's that's not is that
No,
Beltane? No.
no, that's
Um,
spring.
oh my
Um,
goodness.
oh
Why
gosh,
can't I
no,
think
don't ask
Imbolc?
my
Imbolc.
menopausal brain today.
Imbolc is what it is, I'm pretty sure.
Oh goodness,
Um,
yeah,
Either way, we're having a quarterly turn of, or,
yeah.
pie of the seasons is changing. But we have Mars over here in Cancer making a square to Chiron, which it has done so
Mm.
earlier back in October. And then as you can see, we have, I just drew a butt. Okay. That's funny. We have the moon. It's my childish humor. We have the moon in Aries going over that Chiron placement. And then simultaneously, we have this Venus North Node Neptune situation going on. I'm just going to
Hmm.
circle it just because it's there.
Yeah.
But to me, like when I was looking at this Mars Chiron, this Mars irritation story or pain story or, wounding. But then there's this sweetness or like that Venus Neptune North Node. I don't know. What do you think, Yolanda?
Well, to me, Mars, Chiron always, I always think immediately of, are you being the victim or the victor? Are you playing that? Are you comfortable playing the victim? You know what I mean? How much longer is that going to go on for, kind of
Mm,
thing. And then that Venus North Node, it's just the doing what you not doing, because Venus is not so much doing, but you aligning your values with your purpose, right? Aligning your
mm,
values with your purpose. So if you are aligned with your purpose, what is preventing you from living that purpose? And there you were talking about that, Karen, like you're saying, the self-doubt, the low confidence. You know what I'm saying? Is that
yeah.
preventing you from expressing those values, from living those values? So there's
Eh,
work to be done there.
And I think that with that Moon Mars um, mutual reception that's going to happen,
Yeah,
I feel like this is when we might be able to get a handle on what those issues might be. Like we can look at
yeah.
the wounding in the eye. We can look at where the pain triggers our inability to be assertive or to go after what we want by also being softened by this Venus Neptune piece that is very visionary and like, no, look at this Neptune. Don't forget about this, but how's Mars going to engage with that? And so I feel like this could be a very like kind of what you were talking about before, the idea of like we're not going to be victim, we're going to
No.
be victor. And so how do we
But
get to this place of victory?
ultimately, that's what Mars wants for us, right? And we must also remember, because that's a square, right? The
Yes.
square, right? The square is a dynamic aspect. It's a Mars aspect, right? It's related
Yeah.
to Mars, the square aspect. So it's dynamic. You are whenever you hit a square, you're faced with a square aspect, you actually are called to do something. You're supposed to do something to change something. It's not like a trine or a sextile where it's easy and you can just sit back and see things, fall into your lap or happen. A square says no. You have to actually do something. So what are you doing to build up your confidence, for example? You know what I mean? Develop some courage or
Mm-hmm.
daring. What are you actually doing? Because your values and your vision, your higher vision for your life, right? That Neptune, as well as conjunct the North Node, are all aligned at this time. You know what you value, you know what you love, you know what the higher vision is for your life, but how does it manifest in the real world without courage, without confidence,
Yeah.
without self-belief, right? How do you
And
do?
possibly without the start. I mean, we're talking about cardinal signs here too. So it's like, all
Yeah,
right, well, how are you going to get this in motion? Like how is this, where's the
there you go.
starting point, right? Because Mars is getting ready to station direct here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's slowing down, and Mars is getting this hit from Saturn. So here we
Yeah.
see the Moon Mars conjunction around February 9th.
Yeah.
So we get another lunar support hit there, but we have this Mars with Mars and Saturn. So I mean, I love this because this is to me this is a fortitude. This is the
Yes.
long term. We're strengthening. It's easy to like just stay aligned with what matters.
Yeah. I love
Um,
that. Yeah.
and so basically, yeah, around February 9th, give or take, and Mars is going to hover over this area, right? Because it will make a trine to Saturn again. Uh, so I really kind of love the station direct in the sense of just being like solidified in the purpose and like what you're talking about too with necessary boundaries and like what the container looks like. How does the vision now, what we were so enthusiastic about, how does that is created in a space as well? Like, I mean, we need a little more earth there, I will say. So we'll give it some time before that happens. But it does feel just more like things are gelling in some way. Where's our there? Okay, so here we are, station direct. February, I think it's February 23rd. Is it? Yeah,
Yeah. I think it's
February
February
23rd.
23rd. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
So we're here.
Okay.
Oh, look at that. Mercury and Pisces trining
So
Mars
do you
as
see
it
how the story,
stations.
yeah, the story's coming together there. Um, Mercury trine Mars, right? So your thoughts and your actions are aligned, right? You coming from a place of truth, right? You are
Hmm.
aligned. What you're thinking is actually what you're doing. Um, and
Yeah.
we just come from that story where your values were aligning with your purpose. And now you aligned your thoughts with your actions. So you're moving
Yeah.
forward. You see how beautifully you're moving forward now. That whole process, because getting clear on your values is so important. How do you know you have to know what you value in order to create a life, right? A purposeful, a meaningful life, meaningful work, meaningful life. Um, and then, like you say, what at this point, when you look around you, you should be aware of what the space looks like that you've created for yourself. What does the space, literal, metaphorical, what does it actually look like? This
Yeah.
container, this home.
Yeah. It feels very activating around this time just because, I mean, the moon happens to be opposing Mars at the same time and tapping into Mercury and Saturn. You know, Mercury is very close to Saturn.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does feel like a realization moment. And I think this is where we can kind of skip ahead a little bit to think about, we're in Pisces season now, right? So we're in sort of this
Yeah.
transcendent space where we are preparing ourselves to turn over with eclipses, right? Because eclipses are coming at this point in both Virgo and then in Aries. And to speak to the point that we were talking about much earlier in the program with the trine to the sun, right? The Mars is trine to the sun, so that will be on March 7th. We sort of get that reanimation process where everything that we've been working through, not to say we rock it off, right? Because let's
Yeah.
look at old Venus here. When did she? Yeah, Venus goes retrograde like the
Yeah.
last day of February 28th or March 1st, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So we're just trading retrograde for retrograde, but we do get that Sun tri Mars trine that can really help things take off again, at least in the Mars story.
Definitely, because now Mars is saying the Sun Mars story there is you have you have the support. You have support, you are resourced. You
Yeah.
can actually act on you can fulfill your mission, right? You can act on purpose.
And how perfect that the moon is back in Cancer again, too. So once
Yeah.
again, Mars is resourced in a way emotionally. And then the Sun and Saturn together too. So it gives that serious edge and that it can really conquer or
Yes.
concretize the purpose.
Yeah, that higher vision, right?
Yeah,
That beautiful
exactly.
Pisces higher vision that you have for your life. With the Saturn there, it's saying it's becoming manifest, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have that so basically that February 23rd through around March 7th, March 8th, we have that slowly regaining. We're going to be in our Venus retrograde story, but we do get that solidity of the Mars journey, that coming together of Mars and the sun that we were talking about, how
Oh,
important they are,
yeah.
the two, to work together. And so it'll take, Mars is going to take a little time to start to work up speed again. And then we'll get, maybe we'll get a little bit of that Chiron hit where what it was that we learned earlier with our Chiron trigger is hopefully conquered or
Yeah, hopefully.
around
Well,
March 19th or so, March
this is the
21st.
beauty of being human. It's constant work, right? No
Oh,
one
I know.
ever like, it's a constant work. You don't say you don't have doubt. It doesn't all disappear. Um, there'll be moments of self-doubt. It comes and goes. There'll be moments where you don't feel so confident. But that astrology shows it, but it's this continuous work. But if we do, and it's beautiful how it's being played out here, if we do the work and
Oh
take
my
that break
goodness.
during the retrograde period of surrendering as well, it all comes together so beautifully.
Yes, and
It's
what you
almost like
just
that,
said
yeah,
is really tapping into this early April moment.
early April, there you go, yeah.
Yeah, we see this Cancer moon again, resourcing Mars and making a trine to the North Node, Mercury retrograde, Venus retrograde, and Saturn all at the same time. So that surrender that you were talking about, and that alignment with the spiritual story and the purpose and the value and but also the boundaries and the form of what it is we're creating, feels very yeah. And then I got to put Uranus in here too. That goes back to the resources, right? Next
Yeah,
level resources. So I kind of love that moment. I'm
I
like,
love that. I mean, yes. And how beautiful that those two are going to be retrograde just so that you can revisit that you are, in fact, aligned. Are you actually aligned with your values, right? So that's retrograde Venus. And Mercury again, they're asking you to review certain things and how you're communicating and expressing yourself there, right?
yeah. And look at Neptune and Aries now. It's sort of the precursor we talked
Yes.
about
And
earlier, how we're like,
there,
you
and
got to
ruled by
prepare
Mars.
yourself. Yep.
And ruled by Mars. And
Exactly.
Mars, yeah, Mars in Cancer saying, this is my little sacred space. Yeah, this is my container that I've created. Um, and Neptune once again reminding everyone there of the importance of being who you are
Mm.
and not not living the collective dream, right? But Neptune there is not about the collective in Aries.
It's about your
I mean, yes,
personal dreams.
yeah, I mean, look, he is a outer planet. It does impact the collective, but I'm saying in that particular, when he moves into Aries, it's really going to be about your personal dream for sure.
Well, and how we're
The
all
higher,
creators,
yeah, creative, yes. Um, we're all creators, and I think this is going to be hitting hard next year. Like you are here to create something. You're an artist. We're all artists. What are you doing? What are you creating? What does it look
Essentially, yeah. Essentially, the collective is all of our creations collectively.
Yeah, yeah, collectively. Yes.
Yes.
But the stress is going to be in how important it is for you to realize how you have to be yourself in order to bring through some higher expression. Some divine expression like something divine wants to come through you, but you have to be who you are and not what you think you are, or who other people say you are.
Yeah. and to speak to your point of what you just said, fast forwards us to April 26th when Mars in Leo is now getting closer to the station degree, original
Yes.
retrograde degree, and
Yeah.
opposing Pluto.
Yeah.
And so here
Again,
we're back online with
back in line.
our Mars and Leo energy and our empowerment moment with Pluto and sort of the and
Who
being
has the
who we are.
power? Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Who has the power then? Yeah.
So So this kind of wraps us up with just like looking at the overall transits here. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And so we're gonna wrap up our program with thinking about like what can we do during this retrograde period, or not do. Uh, like what's the best use of our time? What do you think, Yolanda?
Well, I think the big message for this retrograde period is going to definitely be retreat. Retreat. And it's a nice little military term.
Yeah, right.
Instead of advance, it's going to be retreat. So retreat, um, because you need to in retreating, in slowing down, you are going to come to certain realizations. You are going to be able to see things clearly. Because what's happening when we're also busy, 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 when we have all this energy to do, we are not able to focus more clearly on the important things. Like, in other words, things are going to come really into focus
Yeah.
during this Mars retrograde.
Yeah.
I really do. I think things are going to come into like what really matters.
I think that's so important because when you think about just the retrograde in general, who's ruling the retrograde the whole time? We either got the sun or we got
Yeah,
the
the
moon,
moon. And they're doing this, right? They're just
right?
constantly traveling.
Exactly.
So,
We're getting what we care about, what we feel, what our intuition is telling us, a soul level, and we're getting directive from our from spirit and our vitality and
good.
our source and
Yeah,
our purpose and our identity. And so having our action energy review what the directives are of those two of the luminaries that literally light the way and create the cycles that we live upon. It does feel very purposeful and to come back to your idea of like what does home look like? Well, how do we return to the purity of our emotional like moon lunar connection and our solar connection with ourselves?
yeah. Like what really, really matters. And what really, really matters is the home. Like who are you sharing space with? Your family. Who, you know what I mean? Who are you sharing space with? Why are you sharing space with them? And then how are your actions expressing the essence of who you are?
Yeah.
How are you doing who you are?
And how at home are you with yourself?
Yes, how at home are you with yourself? And none of this, we need time out to actually reflect on these big questions
I know.
because we're all just so busy. And this is what this Mars retrograde's going to do, is going to slow us way down so that we have somehow time's gonna be carved for us to actually have time to reflect on this. Like, okay, you don't have anything else to do now, enough Netflix. You are now going to actually think about these big questions.
Which is very fitting, right? At least here in the Northern Hemisphere, we are going to be in winter time.
Yeah,
And so we're in our gestating, hibernating zone anyway. So
which
if
is
there's any
perfect.
time to take
Yeah,
a time out,
it's
now
now.
would be it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I
all
think
right.
yes.
Well, I feel like I always ask one word to describe the transit. I feel like we had a couple words, but if you were to blurt out one thing, give it one descriptor, what do you think? Or one word that comes up?
Well, to be too down. Well, I'm going to say retreat, but then wanted to say to slow down. Just slow down, like slow way down, like three words. Slow way down.
Slow.
Way slow.
Oh, yeah. I just
Take it.
imagine like as you said that, I imagine like a leaf that just like floats on its way down to the tree, how it
Well,
hits the certain like air
oh,
and it's slow and it's
just
graceful.
slow down.
Yeah, I
Just
definitely support both
savoring.
that.
And Cancer, very much like Taurus, loves food, right? It's about savoring life's moments, I think, now. And we are moving into the holiday season and all of that, right? It's just about savoring, slowing down, ease, rest, all those good things, which we just don't do enough of.
Mm. I feel like my word is feel, because I think a
Oh,
lot of
lovely.
times we, especially if you're not someone who has a bunch of water planets that are,
Yeah,
willing to go there, I think having the time to really feel what we're feeling and what's moving through us on more of an, like that it's hard even to put words in it, because if you're a feeler, there's no words around things. It's just like a sensation that runs through you, and not to ignore what it is you feel, whether it's you're feeling that in the moment or it's something you felt for a very long time that's not being addressed.
mm,
Really allow yourself to feel, because I think that's where a lot of the shifting can happen, when we're honoring our feelings, and that more, mysterious side of ourself, that mystical side of ourself, that irrational side of ourself that can be very rational at the same time.
I love that. Yes, Mel, that's very true for this retrograde. The importance of feeling your feelings. So do your feelings kind of thing. Yes, feel your feelings. I love
Even
that.
if they irritate you,
Even if
even if
they
they take you places that you're like,
yes,
I don't want to deal with this.
for sure it will.
Yeah, you have the courage to deal with some difficult feelings. Or maybe not difficult, maybe inspiring ones, but they're like, oh my God, I feel this. What am I gonna do about that? Yeah. So retreat, slow it way down,
Lay down.
feel your
Feel your
feelings,
feelings.
and you're gonna transcend into our 2025 reality.
Yeah. There's definitely a need to shift things because of what's coming. It's a
Yeah,
momentous year next year.
it
So,
is.
and we all need to shift something.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah. And not,
And
not everyone
that
knows what it is. That's why they need this period now. They need to slow down.
what came to mind actually is I was just gonna say, Gray Crawford and I are gonna
Yeah.
record part two of 2025 here on the Mercury Sun Cazimi coming here later this
Yes.
week.
I'm looking forward to
Uh,
it.
but one of the things we're gonna be talking about a lot is Jupiter in Cancer. So I am thinking about
Oh,
our Mars.
love him.
Uh, you
Yeah.
know, Mars is doing some work in this zone. And then Jupiter is going to come by. So even if we make cuts and we have to Mars out in whatever the Cancer house is for us and those storylines, Jupiter is going to come along later in the year and in 2026 as well. And it's almost like wherever we burnt down the ground, the idea of like preparing the land, the seeds are going to be planted and the spring will start again. So that's something to keep in mind especially if we feel tense about, uh, especially if we're tense around something that we might have to destruct or level in some way as part of the process.
Yes, yeah. There might be tension now, but we've been speaking about cutting and removing a person or a situation or yourself from a situation, or you know, getting rid of certain beliefs or a whole belief system, which is stressful, which can be stressful to think about, which can be
Yeah.
hard. But there is this beautiful Jupiter exalted in Cancer coming up, right? Where he's going to open things up in our Cancer house. So again, I mean, just look at the Cancer house and see what it's associated with and what's going to open up there, what's going to burgeon and
What's going to
grow there.
blossom? What's
What's
going
going
to
to blossom for
blossom?
sure.
It's going to
Yeah,
get copious amounts of water
a
once
lot.
Jupiter arrives. It'll be well watered. All right, Yolanda. Well, I think we did a wonderful treatment of this upcoming Mars retrograde. There's a lot to think about and feel and move through. And honestly, I'm kind of excited for it. I really love what we fleshed out here today. So before we go, where can people find you again? Let's remind
So,
folks.
yeah, they can find me on Substack. I write there. I have, newsletter on Substack. I'm there every week. And it's Yolanda Bella on Substack. And then there's also my website, and it's yolandamcadam.com with a hyphen between Yolanda and McAdam. And that's it. Thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah, and so wherever, of course, wherever you're watching or listening, you can look in the comments section or the description section, and you'll see the links for Yolanda. You'll see the links for me at energeticprinciples.com. And yeah, so we'd love to know what you're thinking about with Mars retrograde. What if you're excited for it, if you're feeling some of the things that we're talking about, like your own take. Leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube, like, subscribe, share it with a friend. People need to know that we're going to be going through this pivotal period that leads us in to what 2020, like, essentially empowers us in our stories for 2025. So we want to take advantage of that. Also, if you're listening on audio, podcast style, leave a review wherever you listen because that helps the podcast. Mars will be retrograding through my ninth house of broadcasting, so we will see. Help beef that up. Yeah. So, all right. Well, I'm inspired. I am motivated. That's because Mars hasn't gone retrograde yet. But I feel really good about what we talked about. So thank you again, Yolanda, for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, take your time, retreat, slow it way down, and remember to feel. We'll be with you along the way. And as always, may the stars be with you.